I'd just like to welcome everybody to ASU and the Center for Services Leadership. My name is Thomas Hollmann. I'm the Executive Director of the Center. Our guest on this edition of A Conversation With is Rick McCombie. Rick was the Executive Vice President and Chief Client Officer at the Co-Operators. He is a leader of the service discipline, a great guy and a very good friend of the Center. Rick, thank you for joining me on our webinar.
Oh, thank you, Thomas. Thanks for having me. Great.
I'm looking forward to our conversation, but first a few technical notes. Everybody on the call to send a question that we are going to work through. You're going to be muted throughout, but if you want to send a question, please open your chat window. If you wiggle your mouse at the bottom, there is an option to have chat going. Click on that and then you can type in a question. You can send it to everyone or to Denise. Denise Firing is going to be our co-host on this call for the questions. If you are listening by phone, you won't be able to do that, but you can enter a second window by your PC and then send a question. We're also recording, so if you have technical issues at any point, you can just rejoin and then see what you missed on the posting that will follow after the webinar. All right, with the technical notes out of the way, I'd like to start by learning a bit about you, Rick, and let's start at the very beginning. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Collingwood, Ontario, which is a small town on the southern shore of Georgian Bay, so part of the Great Lake system, called really basically central Ontario. I think for most people, they know Toronto and where Toronto is. So we're about 2 hours straight north of Toronto, and the McCombie family got there because that's my grandparents left Scotland and they were looking for a new life, and so they ended up in Collingwood. My grandfather was a shipbuilder, so it was a one industry town. Everybody kind of worked at the shipyard.
It's a beautiful area. I drove up there once from Toronto, and my car broke down halfway, so I had a weird rental car. So that's the most I remember about that trip is that weird rental car that I was driving. So I don't know. It was a very beautiful area for sure. Please talk a little bit about the beginnings of your career. How and where did you get started?
Well, I got started actually not that far from Collingwood. I did a lot of summer jobs when I was in Collingwood. I actually did work in the shipyard for part of that. I found out, I think summer jobs, sometimes you find out what you don't want to do in life. And certainly some of those jobs that I did do, I was thinking, hopefully there's a better job out there, a better career for me. So I went to a place just on Georgian Bay as well, not that far from Collingwood, called Owen Sound, and applied for a job with the Co-Operators. And fortunately enough for me, I was able to get the job as an office trainee in Owen Sound and was able to work with Co-Operators for 43 years. So
that's a great career and a long career at the Co-Operators. Can you maybe take us a little bit about a brief overview journey of your career with the Co-Operators?
Yeah, so I certainly won't go into all 43 years, but when I started there, I started as an office trainee, as I said, and I had an option to go into the accounting area. And most of the business courses that I had taken at college were related to business and accounting. So I wanted to get my accounting degree. So the first really 10 years with the company I spent in accounting, moved once through that, and then had an opportunity about 10 years with the company to go to the Atlantic Division, which on the east coast of Canada, and worked there in the division as their division controller. And that really gave me the opportunity to get to know the business better, work with the business leaders there, whether it was the sales of the claim side, just so people understand what Co-Operators is as an organization. We're a financial services organization. Our model isn't the same as, but very similar to the State Farm model that you would see in the US. Our primary lines are auto and home, but we sell life insurance and investments and commercial insurance as well. So when I went to the Atlantic, I did have that opportunity to get more engaged in the business of insurance and financial services. And it was there that I was appointed as a region vice president for, as it turned out, for the Atlantic. So I went out there as a controller, ended up being the vice president for the Atlantic, and then spent the next 16 years doing that job in 4 different regions. So I moved a number of times through that period throughout Canada. And then 2002, I was appointed into the national distribution role, which eventually evolved into chief client officer. I had all the touch points with the clients through that role. So it was a big change for me. I'm not obviously a national role, and I thought I traveled a lot in the region. And I found out when I got a national role, I was on the road even more. So this time in an airplane.
Racking at those frequent flyer points in the old days.
Exactly.
Now it would be frequent Zoom points that you'd be racking up. Yeah, it's
yes, that's changed.
Different world there. You joined the board of the Center for Services Leadership here at ASU in 2006. Tell me about how you became involved with the center and your experience with the center.
Yeah, so Dan Thornton, who had done the distribution role back in the 90s, actually was the one that got us connected with the center, and he was on the board for a number of years. And so when I came into the distribution role, he was still with the organization. He was actually at that time managing our life insurance operation. So the first thing I did was, his encouragement, I attended the symposium, got a lot out of it, and then he had recommended to our executives that I take his spot on the board. So that's how we got started there, and it's been a great experience. I mean, Dan often talked about the experiences that he had and what he learned, and through that, I felt very much the same way. I mean, it gave me an opportunity to talk to people that were outside of our business and learn from them, talk to people in the academic world, and get their thoughts and perspectives on what was happening. And oftentimes it was just those casual conversations that you have with people at the board meetings, at the symposium, and then make connections through there. And then through that, we made sure that we had lots of people come to the symposium, the Strategic Institute. We've had lots of people attend those sessions as well, because there's such a wealth of knowledge. The one thing that I would just mention, I think a highlight for me in that relationship is, I'm looking at Mary Jo right now, is Mary Jo got us connected with Martin Mende, and he did this project with us on attachment theory, and it was groundbreaking for us, because we have a very strong Co-Operators, have very strong brand in the Canadian marketplace, but we have our advisor agency force as well that are very strong in their communities. And this whole question is like, where's the strongest attachment? Is it to the brand, the Co-Operators, or is it to the local agent and advisor? And so he took that on, and there was some tremendous learnings about that, tremendous learnings about our clients and the different attachments that they'd have to the organization, and some real surprises too through that. So that was something that really helped us on our client journey and our client experience.
That's a great perspective. Yeah, I've done some research a little bit around the other side of it, the blame in a network. So if something goes wrong, in particular, what I looked at was the question of food delivery services. Now, this was about a year ago or so. So maybe it has changed now, but basically looking at, if you order something and you use, say, Grubhub from a restaurant, and there's a driver, right? There's three parties in there. There's the restaurant, the driver, and Grubhub. And if something goes wrong, whatever it is, maybe the order isn't complete, or it's cold, or whatever it is, who do you blame? Do you blame the driver, or Grubhub, or the restaurant? And so that whole notion of networks, I think, is becoming even more important nowadays, not just within companies, but also beyond just understanding how networks work together. Who has the brand, who has the attachment, and who gets the blame, right, if things go wrong. So lots of fascinating questions that way. But let's stick a little bit with your career and your overview for us just a second. You have, of course, been a leader in Canada, and you have a lot of experience with the US in the center and otherwise. Do you see differences in how each country looks at services?
I really don't see that from a service perspective. No, I really don't think much is different between the two countries. I mean, a lot of the big brands, a lot of the big service organizations that are in the US or in Canada, your McDonald's, your, Amazon, Apple, and, I mean, I could go on. The one thing I would say, Canadians generally I think are a little bit more patient, so they might have a, you know, be a little bit more tolerant around some stuff, but generally I think there are many similarities between the expectations of service and how it's delivered.
That's great. You know, I remember from Mary Jo's textbook, there's a vignette in there about, I think it was Valerie buying a pen in Japan or something like that, and where all of a sudden there were like 10 people jumping into action in terms of helping her find a pen and where she could go to find a pen and trying to translate the right words for her and all those kind of things. And I always think of that when I think of international differences, but then of all places, I had a somewhat similar experience in a Walmart here in here in Arizona when I was looking for a gift for my daughter a few years back now. She was much smaller, looking for just something really, you know, maybe a $10 item it was. And there were like 5 people jumping into action trying to help me find that. I always think of, gee, you know, maybe we are more similar than we always think. And your story fits in with that as well.
Yeah, you know, Thomas, that's a good point, because I think we sometimes talk too much about the differences. There's way more similarities right across. I mean, I've had the fortune of travel a lot, even outside of North America, and I think there's way more similarities than differences.
That's right. We're all in this together. Tell me, before we get into some topics here, tell me a little bit about your involvement outside your business career and how that can help shape you, as well as giving back to the community. I know you're quite involved, have always been in the United Way, and are even more involved in it now. Please tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I'll finish that at the end. But I mean, you know what? My dad was always very involved in the community when I was growing up, and so it just seemed a pretty natural thing for me as well to do that, to volunteer. And I think it's, you know, as most volunteers would say, I get way more out of it than I give into it. And so one of the things that, because of the amount I traveled and my schedules and the fact that I've moved so much, I would always join the local United Way when I moved to a community and get involved with them. And that way you really understand your community better when you have an understanding of what some of the social issues are and what some of the challenges are, and you get to meet the people that are really committed and dedicated to help and to fix. So I've been involved in the United Way, I think, in every location that I've worked in. I've been fortunate enough to be the volunteer chair, a number of times in the community. I think total about 5 times now in different communities. And in Guelph, just recently, I was on the board of the local United Way, and our executive director left earlier this year. And the board wanted to spend a bit of time thinking about who the next executive director would be or should be. And so they've asked me to fill in. So, you know, I retired from Co-Operators in early in 2019. And now I didn't quite get a year in of my retirement, and I was back to work. So I've got to work in this kind of crazy new environment where you just spend your whole day in front of a computer talking to people. And there's been many a days I've come out of this basement office I'm in, and I tell Joanne I'm just zoomed out from the.
That's on your life.
The different experience. The one thing I would say, you know, but Thomas, the one thing I would add to it, I like I said, you get a lot more out of it than you give into it, but it helps your business skills too. The one thing that I found out pretty quickly. I mean, I think when you start an organization, most of us want to be successful. We want to do more. You know, we want to be, you know, the supervisor, the manager, the director, the vice president, whatever, you know, whatever it is, whatever you're looking for. And you naturally think, well, you know, the higher I get, you know, the more power I'm going to have, or more authority I'm going to have. But you find out very quickly that you really don't control nearly as much as you think you do in any position. And you really get things done through influence. You get things done the proper way through influence. Now, you take that into a volunteer setting where everybody's there on their own time, and you really have to hone those skills and have to really kind of hone what that means, and really motivate people and get them involved and drive what you're trying to do in the community. So
that's very true, and a great transition into our first topic of staff engagement. And actually, we do have a question from the audience that is relating to that. So I'm just going to read that one off here in terms of the volunteering. And a lot of companies, have, of course, the executives volunteer at a variety of places, but also have programs throughout the company encouraging volunteerism. And so the question is, how do you see the similarities between volunteering, having service to the community, and having that service mentality then be ingrained into an individual?
Yeah, well, you know, we did that at Co-Operators. I mean, we were encouraged to do these things too. So not only did I have my own personal view around volunteering, but the organization really encouraged that. And we had programs where we gave staff time off to volunteer. We always supported, I mean, we supported United Way, but we supported lots of other organizations as well. And I think if you've just got a culture that speaks to that encourages that, then the people will step up and do those things. And so certainly that was the culture at Co-Operators. And I think people they feel different about the organization because they have a sense that the organization is more just in the business. It really cares about its employees. It cares about the people in the community, and it cares about people that are at risk.
That's actually also a good connection to our thought leadership chat a couple of weeks ago with Len Berry about service culture, where it was sort of discussed and proposed that really everybody, even not just going outwards towards United Way or other things, but even inside the organization, all employees are volunteers. And you had some interesting thoughts on that, so maybe if you can expand on that.
Well, you know what, I really enjoyed that session with Len and Terry, and I think that, you know, Len he's always so thought provoking, and you know, that statement around all service employees are volunteers, it really resonated with me. It made me really kind of think about that, you know, that employee relationship and about staff and the difference that they can make. You know, I've always had the view. It's not 100% of the people that work for you in the organization or work in an organization, but the vast majority want to do the right thing. They want to look after clients. They want to be successful. They want their organization to be successful. So, you know, I found that my role and the organization's role was really to put them in that position, to give them the autonomy to look after clients, to trust them to do that, trust them to deliver the promise that the organization is putting forward, and you know, give them the proper training so that they could develop the skills and the support. And if you know, for me, that's kind of when the magic happens, when everybody kind of gets that and understands that. And the volunteer piece to me was what's really resonated around that statement by Len is that when people volunteer, they volunteer because they have a passion and a commitment and a dedication to that organization. And so if you can get your people feeling that way about your company and its promise, then you're gonna have that exceptional service. You know, and part of that again too is you know, making sure that you listen, that you're approachable, that you really understand you know, what they're going through, and making sure that, you know, you're supporting them in the ways that they need to be supported to do their job.
That's great points. And another aspect of this is it's a two-way street. So what's the investment the company makes in the employees, for instance, in education and training? So you were talking about how the Co-Operators have over many years sent a lot of people to the symposium and the institute. Please tell us a little bit about your thinking in getting this effort underway and how it fits with the Co-Operators and how it has helped the Co-Operators.
Yeah, well, it gets back to that kind of what I'll call the skill development and the training. We were very, very committed to that. I mean, I used to have people in the industry in Canada always, I mean, there's, you know, people leave organization to go somewhere else. And I don't know how many times I go to an industry meeting and they would say, well, we're always trying to poach your people, Rick, because they're the best trained in the industry. And we spent a lot of money and effort on the training part. When you looked at, there's always lots of courses, Insurance Institute courses, financial courses. We we made sure that, you know, our people were participating in those programs as well. So we would, if you looked at a list from any organization, we'd have more there than anybody else. And when it comes to this, the center, it was the same thing, really. We saw an opportunity through the Strategic Institute to take, you know, 2 or 3 key people that were, you know, at the manager or director level that we saw a lot of upward potential to come down and develop their skills, hone their skills, and again, you know, to connect with other people in other industries and learn from that as well, and make some of those connections. And the symposium as well, we would make sure that we had lots of people attend there. I remember when the 1 year in the strategy, we were working on our client engagement strategy. So we've been working with the board, and we were just ready to launch it. And we had, you know, as any kind of new strategy, there's a bit of a reorg going on. And so I had some new team members working with me, and some, we, you know, we came to the symposium. I can't remember that year. I think we brought about 20. It was a huge number. And I must be, Denise is nodding her head, so it must be the number. But when we went there, I just said, we're going to go there and we're going to learn a bunch of stuff. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about what we learned. There was so much around what we could do differently. There were some speakers there. I remember somebody from Starbucks spoke, and I can't remember her name, but she was very impactful. And they had developed some training programs for the frontline people. And we thought, God, we're really good at, you know, training the product and some of that, but we're not as good in the soft skills. So let's do some of that. So again, you know, I let them go at it. Actually, I just said, you know, you guys tell me what you think we need to do, and I'll make sure we get the support to do it.
Well, that's great in terms of the staff engagement. I think another aspect of that I'd like to talk about a little bit is the notion of mentoring and being mentored, and sort of watching out for people and helping them along their career. Did you have any mentors? And this is, by the way, another question from the audience that I'm just reading off here. Did you have any mentors early in your career? And if so, what are some key lessons they taught you?
Oh yeah, I had a number. I had some guys that I worked for that they were my boss, but they were really even more my mentor. I mean, I go back to the Atlantic situation. I went in there. The individual that I was working for was late in his career, named Al Gant, and he brought me out there and basically said, you know, Rick, I need a controller here, but I really want you to get to learn the business, understand the business. And so he just created opportunity after opportunity for me to do more, and became a mentor for the rest of my career. He's in his mid 80s now, and we still connect, we still chat. So I mean, he's just one. Dan Thornton, who I mentioned earlier, as well through the symposium again, and Dan's still somebody I connect with, somebody that can challenge you. And there was times where they challenged me, because we can always get a little comfortable. We get a little comfortable with where we are, a little comfortable with our career. And then you need somebody to kind of give you a bit of a poke once in a while and give you some advice. And then there's times when you're down and you need support. And so, you know, somebody said one time that their job was to inflict the comfortable and support the inflicted. So it was kind of an interesting thing. There's a bit of that, and I've done some mentoring myself, and I try to keep conscious of that.
No, that's great. There's, of course, in the academy, a very explicit version of that mentoring, with you have the dissertation chairs, and so I'm originally from Germany, and we actually have a slightly different wording around that. So instead of dissertation chairs, we call that person our doctoral parent. So it's it's like Mary Jo was my doctoral mother, so what we would say in Germany. And so it's so that idea, like a parent guiding the next generation of academics, or that same idea in business. And I think sometimes in business, it's not, it could be more direct than we do it, where it is somewhat haphazard, where you happen to be lucky of having a good boss or running into someone, and then something develops. And in the academy, it's very explicit. You have to find someone to mentor you, and that's sort of a good thing that can maybe cross over in the center in terms of just understanding each other and how we operate and learning from each other. So staff engagement was sort of one area that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about. The next one you've already mentioned now with the whole notion of customer experience. And
Yeah.
that's been, of course, a big part of your career. If you could maybe start us off on your thinking on customer experience and how that happened at the Co-Operators and how that shaped your career.
Well, you know what, client experience, client service, it's really a client journey more than anything. You kind of learn as you go. The one thing I would say when I came into this role, or not this role, not in that role anymore, but the role that I was at the national level in 2002, is we felt we were pretty good on the client service side. And in fact, we felt kind of, it's like we really didn't know. And then we really started to measure it. And I think, it's important in anything to really kind of to measure. And that's one thing, again, that CSL, I learned from them as well. And the first time we heard Net Promoter Score was at the center. And then, so we started using Net Promoter Score. So we found out maybe we weren't as good as we thought we were. Then JD Power came into the Canadian insurance market. And again, we were just pretty average. And in fact, I can remember having a discussion with the CEO at the time. And basically we had to make a decision. Were we comfortable with kind of being average, or did we really want to go for it? And we set some really, really big, audacious objectives around our Net Promoter Score and our client service score and our JD Power score, because these were, not only could we get measurements internally, but we could finally now look at some of the external measurements as well to see how we were really measuring up. And what was interesting about some of that was some of the stuff was really pretty basic. It wasn't, it was pretty basic. Some things we were missing, like billings that people could understand and read. So they knew what their coverages were, billing options, payment options, things like that. One of the things that was interesting, and nobody likes rate increases. Nobody likes their insurance rates, especially if you haven't had an accident or a claim in a long time. All of a sudden it goes up. Why should I pay more? But things happen, rates go up. And what we would do was we really encouraged, we would flag the ones where they had the larger increases. We would phone them up. We would talk to them about, we'd give them options around increasing deductibles or changing coverages. And there were some pretty basic things that we were able to do very quickly. And other things that took a little bit more work was, just understanding our clients better. We did personas on our clients. We did client journeys. We did all of those things as well. And so, but when, it was interesting, the one thing that I would say in that 4-year period, we were in average scores, and we had said we were going to win in the next 4-year strategy, that by the time we got to the end, we were going to be winning a couple of the JD Power awards. And the very first year of the strategy, we won 2. And I remember thinking, okay, this is great, but what the heck are we going to do now? Yeah. And by the end of it, we won every award in every category except for one, and we finished second there. And so that felt good that way, but it also just felt good because there was a lot of work and a lot of time. I was really blessed. I had some really, really great people working with me, people that really understood it, got it. Paul Molodzic, who spoke at the symposium, really understood what the client was looking for and had a marketing and communications background. So, and Paul and his team, and the region vice president, Mark Feeney, who's attended a lot of the symposiums, and some others as well. So
that's great. The customer experience, you raised some important points in terms of how do we attack the problem of customer experience. It's a very popular topic right now, and oftentimes it gets overcomplicated. It really is, as you said, 2 things, right? You should ask customers, and you should get some basics right.
Yeah.
You do those 2 things, you are well ahead on this whole customer experience notion and getting that right. I remember from my own career, I was actually a competitor of yours for a while. I was at Sun Life Financial in Toronto. for a number of years. And so one of the things that we at Sun Life prided ourselves on was that we were really flexible, that we were really able to do, this was on the business to business side of the world, so the group plans, and we were really able to do whatever they wanted, we could figure that out, and we were really flexible. And then when we went out to our clients and asked them for the first time about flexibility and, you know, on a 1 to 10 scale and all that stuff, we were floored because we got a really low score. It was just like, what's going on? We're so flexible. How do you not, you know? And so then we did follow-up work there again. Ask your customers, right? They tell you something that you don't understand, ask them. So we went out and did some qualitative work around understanding what's going on. And what we found was that to them, flexibility had actually 4 aspects. And one of them we were really good at, and the other 3 we were stinking it up. And so, you know, that notion of internally we were so self-satisfied with, oh, well, why even ask about flexibility? We're so awesome. And then they come back and say, oh, well, yeah, 1 out of 4, yes, and the other 3 you got work to do. So that whole notion of ask them and get some basics right, I think that's a good starting point for customer experience.
It's a bit humbling, really. Some of that stuff is really, and believe me, we were pretty humbled at the time. So yeah,
that's it's and the NPS score as well. You know, the notion of oh, we're going to score really high, and then you don't, and then you start. It's working, right? You got to work then the process of asking, improving, but then you can get there. So winning all those awards, that's really a proof that you are doing the work right. I think that's another thing that I always see from the academic perch here, is that often it seems like a reflex. Customers are asked about things. Oh, NPS, let's ask them NPS, but then there is not the follow-up there. So it's that follow-up where you win or lose then later. Let's move on to another topic that's near and dear to everybody's heart now with our digital lives that we lead currently. The whole notion of digital and digitization that goes back at least 20 years, where I had a conversation with my boss at the time, who, you know, this was the late 90s, and who was saying digitization, you know, we got to go into that and figure something out. And, you know, then his warning was, well, if you digitize a broken process, you're just going to drive the car into the ditch faster. You know, that notion, right? To where we are now, where everything is digital and we're living our lives digital. How did you see that digital journey and where you were and how you've gotten to where you are at the cooperatives?
Well, you know, that was, Thomas, that was such a challenge too, right? I mean, as you said, it's not like something that happened last year. It's been a long road there, and we were, you know, as I'm not sure I said, but I talked about the role of our advisor and the agent in the communities. You know, we have some 700 retail locations in Canada. From an insurance perspective, nobody else would come close to that number. And so we prided ourselves on, you know, local service, local delivery, and local engagement in the community. And you want to keep that, because that's value, and that's value added. But you also know that things are changing around you. You know, digital offers way more convenience to clients to do things on their terms, on their time. And at the same time, digital increased expectations as well. So, you know, things can happen quicker if we can do this. I can go in and make a change or something and get confirmation right away, rather than make a phone call or wait for something to come in the mail. So that's something we spent a lot of time studying. We spent a lot of time thinking about where we needed to go. And I have to admit, we had resistance at times. Like we would get resistance from some folks. Well, just kind of leave it the same. Things are working well now. But we knew it was changing, right? It really was changing. The marketplace was changing. We were looking at trends too in the industry. And the one thing, you know, there was one particular trend we were looking at. You know, what's the most important aspect of an insurance transaction? And, you know, there was things around pricing and product and features and benefits and things, but something called convenience kept on creeping up over a 10-year period. It went from, you know, towards the bottom to number 2, and that convenience was all delivered through digital. So a number of years ago, we started thinking about what that meant and what we needed to do. And some things that we did do was because we were going to have to get buy-in from our sales force, from our agents, from the current service deliverers. And so we brought in some speakers that were from the travel industry. And think about how the travel industry got revolutionized by some of the digital aspects. And so we brought some of that in. What we talked to them about was face-to-face doesn't have to be, in the same room. You can do face-to-face through technology. We do it now. We're kind of all been forced to it, but 10 years ago, it was there, but we were starting to promote that within the organization. A few years ago, we introduced an insurance app. We were one of the first ones that did that. And so you could make some small changes. You could look at, you could report a claim. You could look at all your policies. You could check the wordings. It was just another. Now, interesting enough, some of that stuff doesn't get picked up all the time because people are comfortable in the relationships that they have already. So how they interact and do business. And so it was going to take some time for it to get to what I'll call the full digital experience for people to pick up on it. And one of the best examples of that when we were, and it was a big investment. Some of the other stuff I talked about, the client experience, there wasn't a lot of money. It was refining some things. There was some things that we needed to do differently, but the digital piece was a big investment. And the young man that was working for me at the time was going on a flight to Calgary, and he was sitting beside somebody, that a business person, obviously, and they got talking about what they were doing, and his name was Pierre McAlpine, and when Pierre landed in Calgary, he phoned me at night and said, "Rick, we got a problem." I said, "What's that?" He says, "Well, I just talked to this individual and I told him about about our app and our online services and all that, and he listened really nicely and acknowledged all that, but he said, at the end of it, he says, "Well, that's really good. Hope you're not spending too much money on that, because all I do is I just text my agent and tell them this is what I need." And I said, "Well, we're going to get that. We're going to get that. We're going to get it all different ways. Some people are still going to come in the office. Some people are going to send a text, an email. Some people are going to do it digitally." And I think we just, we need to find a way, and we need to find the right spot to do that. But that thing is going to evolve. And then so Thomas and I chatted about this the other day, and I think fast forward now to what happened just in the last 4 months, right? The whole world flipped digital. All these conversations are happening like this now. It's just, and so thank goodness the investment and was there to do that. And I think some of the organizations that haven't been able to switch over, haven't made the adjustment, probably haven't had the investment there. Now, we didn't do it because we thought we were going to be in a pandemic. We did it because that's the direction it's going to go. And it all this stuff, I believe, would have gotten there 4 or 5 years from now. But I think this has just moved it it's accelerated all of that change. And so
that's
it'll be
very true.
To see how far we even come back on that stuff. But thank goodness we made some of those investments.
That's very true. And you mentioned something important there, the whole notion, and you expanded on it, convenience, right? Making it convenient for customers. And one of the hottest topics right now in customer experience or in in the consulting world is the notion of customer effort score. So looking at understanding and measuring convenience in a way that the customers are understanding what you're asking, right? So how much effort is it to work with this company? And so customer effort score is a big part of where I think things are moving from NPS. Now, what's the next thing to try and improve? And this whole notion of convenience you've been expanding on with customer effort score, I think is one that's really standing out there. Now, another question from the audience linked to that, just to the last points you were making, with regards to the current climate. So how do you see the current climate and the restrictions on budget? How do you see the need to adapt from face-to-face to remote? Is this just totally different? Is it an acceleration? Is it a continuation? Where are your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly be a continuation and maybe an acceleration as well. I just think that, I mean, we're in a, I mean, how long this continues, I don't know, but it's not going to go back to the way it was. And I also think there's a convenience for the service provider as well. You know, I think about like, it's almost like we're all at home now. I'm not saying we're all at home now, but mostly we are, and largely people feel like they're available. You can get a lot more. They can get a lot more done through video. I don't think it's the only thing, though. I have to say that I do think that we have to find opportunities to build relationships and
sort of like an employee effort score almost.
Right? The only thing, but I certainly think it's going to be you know, a major part of service delivery, and always thought that it would be, and maybe even more so than I expected before. So.
Okay, swinging back a little bit to the customer experience side of things, another audience question here. Did you use a secret shopping service to measure agent performance against a standard?
Yeah, we did that as well. We did that. Yeah, we did a bunch of different things to learn from that, and I think that was helpful. The client journey stuff was, you know, the personas and client journey stuff was maybe the most helpful to really understand, because we brought clients in, and it was, I don't know how many times we thought, you know, we thought we knew. It was a bit, Thomas, like what you said. We thought, okay, we really think this the answer would go there, and we'd get the results or look and be there in the survey or talking to them, and we go, oh my goodness, I hadn't thought of that, right? So it was very, very telling.
That's great. Another audience question in that general direction, in terms of now, but also generally, but certainly now, what about the trust that organizations need to earn and then to have that transition between face-to-face and tech?
Yeah, that's, you know what, so if you've got the trust already, then I think then you know, if you were an advisor, an agent, and you got a client and you've already got a trust relationship, and then you want to do a Zoom or something like this through technology, then I think you're okay. If you don't have that relationship yet, then how do you establish that? That's going to be an interesting one. I mean, I'm kind of glad I'm not there now and have to figure that one out. But it's something that you're gonna have to figure out, because you might not have the same interactions going forward with people. So you're gonna have to establish that. So
that's right. That's an interesting
part
of the
challenge. Thing I would say, Thomas, about it though, if you're consistent, and you know, if your messages are consistent, your delivery is consistent, and do all of those things, then you can build that up, right? People want to feel like that you deliver on your promises, you deliver on your commitments, that you're there when they need you. You know, if you do those things, you can build. I can believe you can build that trust.
Well, that's going to be part of the challenge going forward. And so this is a transition for us in the conversation to think about the future and think about where we're heading. And so as a starting part of the section of our conversation, what message do you have for service executives? What are the things to look out for? Pitfalls, tips, tricks, things they need to all work on together? Where is this all headed, and what do we have to do as service executives?
Yeah, you know, and again, I can't help but think about the kind of world that we're in right now, or the environment we're in right now. And when I think about that question, I would say is don't get too disconnected from your clients and your staff. Find ways to make those connections. I think you really need to do that, and you can do it. You can do it through some technology, but certainly for me, it was always important that I got out and I really understood what the issues were, and have real conversations with people, and be approachable. And I think that it certainly helped me in my career, and it helps organizations, especially when they're trying to deliver superior service. So I think, again, we're gonna have to find a way to do that in more of a digital world, and more digital space.
That's right. Switching gears towards our academic listeners, or folks from the Academy, part of the center, of course, our faculty network. looking ahead, and here's an audience question for that. Thinking about the next 10 years, what are things the academic world needs to be doing researching wise or education wise?
Yeah, well, you know what, get back to that. We were just talking about that trust piece. I think there's probably some work that can be done in that area around how do you, what are the methods and what are the ways you can build that trust when you don't have the face-to-face interaction or the same level of face interaction that maybe you had in the past. The other one I think is like, I'm a big believer in culture. To me, culture was community. We have, as an organization, we had a community, in the regions, we had a bit of a community, even when I was in accounting, we had a bit of a community. So when you got all these people working from home, and again, I think people are going to go back into offices, but I don't think as many people are going to go back as that were there prior to COVID. So how do you create those communities? How do you build that culture? It's going to be different when it goes back. I think, again, there's lots of work there academically to figure out what could be done there and how you could do that, because I think the culture is really important. You don't want to lose just because your employees aren't in the office every day, you don't want to lose them. You don't want to lose that passion, that commitment, that dedication. How do you find ways to keep them connected in a way where they feel like they really belong and they really want to do the best that they can do for the organization and the clients and for themselves?
That's great. No, we certainly should listen a lot to each other, right? And that's part of what the center is all about, of course, is just the notion of bringing both sides together so that we can learn from each other and that we can figure out what is happening in industry such that we can help on the academy side with that, and vice versa. The industry listening to, hey, what's going on academically there that is interesting findings, like the attachment research that you were talking about. That was something that came from academic side and really is helpful with your business. Well, you're now a CSL board member emeritus, but still very much involved in the center and in the field. For instance, you're of course on our executive committee for the board, and you're very much also involved in the relationship we have with the co-operators, and so that's will continue for sure. And we heard about your engagement at the United Way. So what are your plans for the future? What are you working on? What would you like to work on for the next few years?
You know what? Well, interesting. Right now, we have hired a new executive director, a permanent one, somebody that we're really excited to bring into the organization. So my first job is to transition out of this current job, and as my friends tell me, retire. So and then go back to the volunteer work that I've enjoyed doing. So I want to do that. I'll stay involved. I've actually had a couple other organizations in our community reach out to me to kind of see what I might be interested in joining, not as an employee, but on the board at least. So I'll go back doing that. I hope now that up in Canada now we have a few less restrictions right now with the COVID, so I can actually go out and hug my grandchildren now. For a while there I couldn't, so I want to do a bit more of that as well. So, but certainly, you know what, I mean, I'm a person that's curious, to like to learn things and like to understand things as well. And so get some of that through volunteerism, get some of that certainly through CSL. I was honored to get that emeritus status. So certainly continue to be involved with the center as well.
Thank you. And for our closing, we have in our Conversations With series the 3 ifs that I always ask our guests on the series. And I'm going to start with the first one. If I could relive something from my career, it would be.
Yeah, well, that was I tested Joanne, my wife, this morning on these 3 ifs. So I let her go first, and she nailed all 3 of them. So I spent 16 years in the region, and I just loved it so much. I just loved the people I work with. We were all really focused on delivering our promise to our clients. The interaction I have with clients, even client complaints, I just felt really close to just kind of close to the action. I really, really enjoyed it. In fact, when I took the national role, when people would ask me how I was enjoying the role, for the first little while, my answer was, I really miss my old role. And then Joanne told me one night, she says, you know what, you're not going back to the region, so would you just forget about that and figure this one out? And you know what I really figured out in the national role, that around the most senior tables, around the executive table and the board, I was the voice of the client. That's what, once I figured out that, then I got really comfortable in the role. But I really miss the region role, but I'd go back to it. In fact, if they offered me a region VP job tomorrow, I might find a way back to that.
Unre-retire or something, right? So I could get back there. The second, if I could change something from my career, it would be.
You know, one of the things that I did have to deal with, and I talked a bit about our agency force, and we had just the superior agency force in Canada. I mean, when we wouldn't have got those engagements or those JD Power scores and the NPS scores without them, because they really deliver in our communities. But we had to make a few compensation changes. There's always, you have to run a business, and you have to, and there's changes that you have to make, and we're pretty uncomfortable at times. And one time in particular, we ignored some trends. We ignored some things and kind of were hoping they would go away. They didn't go away. So the next time they came around, the changes were more significant. And the fact that I knew them, and I mean, they have businesses to run and families and everything. It was a difficult period for me. I mean, I used to tell people that I don't think there was an hour in the day where I didn't think about the impact that was going to have on people. But we got through it. We found our way through it. But retrospect, if we had done something earlier, we could have had more time to ease those in, because sometimes you kind of know where you need to go, but you need to find a way to get there that helps people move along. We just didn't have the time because we ignored some signs.
Right. Thank you. And finally, if I had a magic wand, I would.
Well, that's a real simple one. Like if I had a magic wand that could create a vaccine for COVID-19, I'd do it in the second. It's impacted everybody and everything. And so, when I think about, even in my current role, just to kind of speak to that just for a second, we have these amazing agencies that we work with trying to deliver programs. And so their needs are up, the mental health issues that are the abuse issues, all of those things. So their demand is up, and their funding, they don't have the funds that they've, as simple as a golf tournament that raised $10,000 last year, they can't do that this year. And so it's impacted them in so many ways. And that's just one little snippet. That doesn't even speak to the death and the sickness and everything else. So anyway, hopefully they'll get that vaccine without my magic wand.
Yes, that would be a good use of the magic wand for sure. So I want to say some thank yous. Thank you, first of all, Rick, for joining me on the webinar. Really appreciate it. Then thank you to the audience for your questions and for joining us on the webinar. Thank you to Denise for managing the questions as they came in. I hope to see you soon at one of the next CSL events, and have a great rest of your day and week. Thank you, everybody.